May 25th, 1977 saw the release of George Lucas's Star Wars, which quickly became a surprise blockbuster hit. Often regarded as one of the greatest and most influential movies ever made, it helped change the way movies were made and captured the imagination of a generation. Star Wars quickly became a pop culture phenomenon. Over the course of this series, I will be joined by a number of Star Wars fans from across YouTube and the toy collecting community, as we take a look back at their earliest memories of Star Wars and find out what made Star Wars great. Hello Toy Collector fans, Universal Toy Collector here, and welcome to the channel. And welcome to episode 12 of What Made Star Wars Great, the series where I get to chat to like-minded people about Star Wars from the YouTube and toy collecting communities and find out about their earliest experiences or memories with Star Wars. And also to find out what made Star Wars great. This week, I am delighted to say that I'm joined by Mr. Scott Whitehouse. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi, Stu. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
Not too bad, thank you. Not too bad. Really do appreciate you jumping on and taking part in the series. Thank you so much.
No worries. Delighted to.
No, cool stuff. Cool stuff. So, as I've said at the beginning of every episode, there has been a lot of negativity surrounding Star Wars. I just wanted to hear your take on it and about the negativity. Is it just?
Well, I think any kind of critical, we watch all kinds of programs and we read all sorts of stuff, and it's in our nature to have a critical response to things. That could be that could be positive or negative. I think there's been a lot of negativity in Star Wars going back some time, and it seems to have peaked at the moment with the Acolyte this summer. Seems to have really polarized people, and there just seems to have been an awful lot of anger out there in the community. The way that Lucasfilm are conducting themselves at the moment doesn't seem to be. I mean, just in the last couple of days, there's various announcements coming out that apparently the film that's supposed to be coming out in December 26 has now been shelved. There's talk of there being of Rey being, this character that's going to spearhead sort of 5 more films or a new trilogy or something like that. And it all seems to sort of, they've not followed through. It seems like there's like a dozen projects, supposedly film projects on the go, and nothing's coming to fruition. The only one we know is actually happening is the Mandalorian Grogu, because we've seen some footage and we know they've been filming it. Everything else just sort of seems to disappear. The Rogue Squadron film, that film just sort of vanished, but apparently it's still on the back burner. And
I mean, you're absolutely right. There are a lot of films that have been sort of like announced, and this is the project that we're going to be going forward with, and it does seem to be put, on the shelf, so to speak. But with regards to negativity, I think everybody's entitled to have an opinion on whether they like something or not. Now, with opinions, it doesn't make them factual. It's an opinion. But do you feel that some of the people that haven't liked the Acolyte are being treated a little bit unfairly with the name calling bigots? And I don't want to get too political. I just want to hear your thoughts, and then we'll move on to other things.
No. Yeah, absolutely. I think it seems incredibly unprofessional for the cast and crew of that show to have come out. And that seems really ill-advised on Lucasfilm and Disney's part to not have, spoken to these people before they come out and start. I mean, they're entitled to their opinions too. They can express what they feel about the response. That they've got opinions. But when you work, we both work, and there's a certain code of conduct with what you're expected to say or not. And it seems that what they've done is certainly upset a significant portion of Star Wars fandom. There are people that like the Acolyte, fine. There are people that think it's okay, and there are people that really don't like it. And there's lots of differing reasons, and perhaps some of those reasons are bigotry and such like, but not in everybody's case. And to come out and try and explain why, a show has had such a negative reaction from a significant proportion of the viewership, to blame it on bigotry just seems really, really ill-advised.
I mean,
You know,
yeah, I mean, we will touch on that a little bit later with some of the questions that I've got. But do you feel that the people? Look, I'm like you. You know, we're free to like whatever we want to like. I don't have an issue with that. So there are people that do like the Acolyte. Again, no problem with that. But the people that do like it, do you think that they would have started all this name calling if people like Kathleen Kennedy, Leslie Headland, Amanda Stenberg hadn't come out and publicly attacked the fans the way they did? Because it seems to me that they've said their piece, and now they've just set the fandom on fire again, and then they've gone back off into the shadows and just kept quiet from, you know.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. It's like a rallying cry, isn't it? It's like people, you
Yeah,
know, that they're basically saying defend our show from the bigots, from the racists,
yeah,
and such like. And as someone who went into watching The Acolyte really open-minded,
yeah.
um, you know, struggled with it, you know, but to the three,
Yeah, I think a lot of
four,
people did,
even
Scott,
up,
to be
even up to
honest.
the fifth episode. I mean, the fifth episode was, I think, that was the one where there was the, you know, the lightsaber battle and such
Yeah,
like between the stranger and the Jedi, and that was sort of like the peak. And then it rapidly tailed off, and you know, I went into it really open-minded, but ultimately, you know, it's not a show I'll go back and watch
no,
very often.
no,
I did think
no,
it was very good, but not for any reasons that
yeah, yeah,
you know that sit with the criticisms that have been leveled
yeah,
at people. So it's
yeah,
very difficult to be perhaps part of a community or part of the fandom that didn't particularly like The Acolyte, didn't think it was very successful. To then find out that those criticisms are being, you know, thrown our way, it's quite, you know, you become quite offended by that because it
well,
can
yeah,
be further from the
absolutely,
truth.
absolutely. I mean, look, listen, some of the people that I've heard with their criticism, I think it's been fair criticism. You know, they've talked about story, they've talked about the acting, they've talked about the overall production. You know, and I think when, you know, if you watch something, I think you are fair to criticize on those subjects matter. You know,
Yeah,
those parts of the production, the series and stuff. Look, this isn't me saying I condone racism or bigotry or anything like that,
absolutely.
or threatening comments and stuff like that. I don't agree with that at all. That's bang out of order. And unfortunately, you do get your idiots. But for the most part, I think there has been a lot of valid criticism and just criticism. This is just my opinion, and people know that because they hear it every week. But again, you know, to come out with the way Lucasfilm did and some of the cast, I just think it was, well, I've never heard anything like it, to be honest with you. I've not
I, I just think
heard.
it's really inflammatory, and
Yeah,
it's given those people who are likely to attack the ammunition that they need.
yeah,
And again,
yeah,
those on the other side at the far end, those that are racist and bigots, because they're everywhere as well. Those people,
mm,
it's also giving them the ammunition that they need. Also, you know, those
yeah,
middle of the road people. I mean, to look at a television program or film and consider whether the story, whether the acting, whether production values, photography, special effects, etc., have been done well. That's standard practice in film criticism. There's nothing wrong with
yeah,
that. You go into that.
yeah,
That's kind of a neutral approach. To bring in your own personal feelings or biases is a different matter. But
yeah.
that's not what that's, you know. So you can't criticize everyone. Um, you know, you can't tar everyone with the same brush.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Anyhow, enough of the negativity. Let's find out what made Star Wars great, shall we? So, firstly, what were your earliest memories of Star Wars?
Wow. Well, I mean, I was born in 1974, so a little bit too
Oh,
young
same
then.
here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think I'm just about a
Yeah,
year older than you.
a month, a month.
Yeah, just yeah. Sorry, I said that. Yeah, it's a month.
I
Yeah.
know, I know.
So for me, it's these figures. These are my 1978
Wow, let me
figures.
just enlarge you. Look at these.
No, there's Hammerhead. I mean, he's Stormtrooper. I mean, you can see the state of him.
Yeah,
There's 3PO.
I mean that 3PO looks in really good
He's
condition.
not bad. He's nicely shined. Death
Oh,
Star
Death Star
droid, and
droid as
I
well.
mean,
Wow, R2.
and
Wow. Oh, it still
still a
clicks.
nice sound to
Brilliant.
the R2 as well. And those, I'm guessing my dad bought me those. I imagine he liked sci-fi. I guess he probably went and saw Star Wars when it came
Yeah.
out and bought me those. I'd have been sort of four probably, or get
Wow.
around about four, and I've had those ever since. But then I sort of got today in preparation for this. I watched Star Wars this afternoon. I thought, what better way
Oh,
to
how cool.
consider what
Wow.
made Star Wars great than to watch the film? And it just
Yeah.
every time I watch it, it brings back those memories. You know, the opening scene, that tension and excitement of who's coming through the door. Those Rebel Fleet troopers
Yeah.
all stood.
Yeah.
And I can remember that as a child, that excitement, and then through come the stormtroopers. We've never seen anything like it. You know,
No, absolutely.
it was the most exciting, thrilling thing. And a few other things came to mind. The scene when R2's going down that canyon on Tatooine, and the
Yeah.
Jawas are. I can remember being a little bit scared by that. And how
Oh,
it seems
really?
ridiculous.
Wow.
But I was probably maybe 5, and it
Yeah.
kind of scared me a little bit. You know, and there are other things like that, like Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. You know,
Yeah.
the
I mean,
burnt remains and
yeah.
things like
I mean,
that. Kind
crikey,
of.
can you imagine if that film would have been made now, today, this day and
Exactly.
age? With, oh God, no, I can't have that. That's too scary. But we
Exactly.
coped, didn't we? We managed.
Yeah.
It's a film. We got on with it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there's lots of memories like that. I can remember. I've got a vivid memory of being at school. Our class was in the hall, and they wheeled in one of those great big tellies, you know, where they've got like
Oh,
the
yeah,
plastic
I remember
wood
those
effect
days.
box
Yeah.
around it on a stand. And it must have been last day of term, and they stuck the video in, and it was Star Wars, and the whole class
Oh,
watched Star
awesome.
Wars, and the excitement, and I can just still picture it, and I can remember that because they didn't tell us what they were going to put on until the fanfare started, and we all knew. And I can just remember that rush of excitement in the room, because a lot of people didn't have videos. We wouldn't have had I don't think we had a video player at home then, or had it on video. So such excitement around it. I can remember going to see Empire. I think Empire was taken to see because it'd been about 6, and I can vividly remember Boba Fett in the corridors of Bespin and Han Solo in Carbonite. It's about the only thing I can really remember, but that's kind of seared in my memory. So
you saying that about Empire Strikes Back is really strange, because I didn't see. Well, apparently I did, but I can't remember anything about Empire Strikes Back. My dad took me to see it because I mean, roughly, the same age. Well, we are the same age. But I can't remember anything about the Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah,
from the
that's all
cinema.
I can remember. Just that
really?
one little moment of it, and I can kind of see myself in the cinema. It's bizarre, but that moment must have seared on my memory. Which is fantastic. And
so,
then of course from that came more toys and then Return of the Jedi, which we probably both got much
definitely
much more clarity on our memories of that. It was a big thing for us as sort of being 9.
So what was your thoughts and feelings then when Vader come through the door? Because you said the stormtroopers come through and you wondered who was going to be coming through. You see the stormtroopers blasting their way through the doors. I mean, it was exciting but terrifying at the same time. And then you see this big imposing figure with the breathing apparatus, and you know you can hear him breathing. I mean, what were your thoughts on him?
It's just he's just incredible, isn't he? He's every nightmare. He's every villain that you could ever want rolled into one, really, in a suit of armor. He's fantastic. There's something, you know, Arthurian legend about him. There's, you know, it's just it's absolutely amazing. I just don't think we'd seen anything like it, really. I don't think there is anything, or there was anything like it at the time. And you know, we're talking about it sort of 40, nearly 50 years on. You know, we were kids, but of course it was a phenomena for young adults and adults at the time, wasn't it?
But it still is.
Shocked everyone then.
Still is. It still is, isn't it? In a way, because you know, like it's 40 years later, nearly 50 years later, especially for Star Wars, and we still talk about it with the passion and the admiration and the love of that film that we had as kids. And I generally feel that it was such a great time growing up in that period when Star Wars first came out. Because like you said, Scott, it was the first time we'd really ever seen anything to that extent. You know, on the movie screen. The Star Destroyer coming over the top. I mean, what an opening for a film that is. I mean, you know, we all know that Star Wars really sort of like struggled. George Lucas did when he was making it. And it's a miracle how the film actually got released in the first place and made. But you know, it was just, you know, the trench run, the cantina. It was just and I remember I used to, you know, even when I was in secondary school, that I would have been about 11, 12. I used to take sickies off of school, and I couldn't, I didn't want to go in, and and as soon as my mum and dad went to work and stuff like that, I was straight downstairs, got the blanket on the sofa, Chuck Star was in the video recorder. Happy days. I felt better. All of a sudden, I felt better. But it's one of those movies for me, the original Star Wars. It's just a feel good movie. It's an enjoyable movie. Everything about it is just incredible. And then, like you say, you had The Empire Strikes Back, and because of the success of Star Wars, George could then go on and do The Empire Strikes Back. And wow, what a film that was! I mean, Irvin Kershner is renowned or known for saying that he didn't want to do it originally, but because how could you top Star Wars? He topped it in my opinion. I thought Empire is the best film for me in the whole
I
series.
agree. Yeah, I mean, I agree. It still does stand out as the
Yeah,
absolute pinnacle of Star Wars to me. It's something about the way it makes you feel. It's something about its atmosphere. So it's something in. It's technically brilliant. It looks fantastic. It's a brilliant story. It ends on a dark cliffhanger, which I love.
absolutely. Yeah,
But there's something intangible about it as well, and I think it's you had to be there, and it's a magic moment for some of us that were there. We're lucky we were there for it. And I'm
yeah,
not sure what happens to kids discovering it today in the midst of all this kind of mire of other Star Wars content around. I'm not sure what would someone pick Empire out and be able to see it for what it is? Perhaps as they get older and you look at it
yeah.
technically and you look at the story and how it carries the story on. It's still brilliant in that sense, but
Yeah, I mean, character development, I think is key
yeah,
in any kind of TV series or films and stuff like that. And the development that you had within Empire Strikes Back, particularly Luke, because he was training to become a Jedi. I mean,
hmm
what Mark Hamill did when he was the only actor on set with Yoda, I just thought was incredible because, again, it's been said if that scene had failed or Yoda had failed, it would have just looked absolutely ridiculous. So, hats off to Mark Hamill for that acting because he, and Frank Oz, because they brought that character Yoda to life. And to me, when I look at it, I don't think it's a puppet. I just think, wow,
no,
what an incredible piece of,
it's Yoda. It
filmmaking. Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
a completely believable character, isn't it?
I mean, when you first saw him, did you think this is going to be Yoda, or was you expecting something completely different?
I can't remember. I can't remember.
Yeah,
I like to think I'd have realised, but perhaps not. Perhaps not.
yeah,
It's quite well signposted, but
yeah.
it's
And then it had the greatest reveal. I am your father.
absolutely,
I mean, wow. I
absolutely.
mean, for them to keep that secret, can you imagine trying to do something like that these days with
Yeah,
social media and
no,
people
no.
are bound to
It,
let it
it
leak and
it's
slip and stuff,
still
aren't they? So
it still makes me have goosebumps and brings the hairs up on the back of my neck. And I
yeah,
must have seen that
yeah,
film 150 times.
yeah,
It's just every time.
yeah.
It does it. I get
I mean,
immersed
did you
in it.
believe him to start with? Did you believe him? Was you like, okay, is he lying? Or
I think I believed him. I think I always believed him because
yeah, okay,
he's so sincere. And it's funny because the moment when Luke decides, no, I'm not going with you, and he drops, Vader just drops his arm in disappointment. And
yeah,
it to me, if he was just tricking him, it wouldn't be. And when I mean, we might get onto this, but when he marches off, bring my shuttle, he says in the original version.
yeah,
They tracked that in the special edition, unfortunately. But there's a kind of a grief in there as well. I always felt, because he's lost his son. He thought he got his son back, and he's lost him. I felt. So
Do you
I
think it
thought
was
it
a
was a
case of
brilliant
that he's actually
performance.
lost his? Do you think it was the fact that it was the fact that he'd lost his son, or the fact that he had lost someone that could have helped him overthrow the emperor?
I think I was thought because of the exchange they have, the thought exchange they have when Luke's on the Falcon. I think there was almost like a tenderness in that. It's like he says, Luke says father, and he says son, and I think there's a connection formed in that moment, really. So I think it was about the father-son relationship more than it was about the
Really? Wow, that's
overthrowing the
interesting.
emperor.
That's interesting.
I think so.
Because he said,
that's how
"Join
I
me," didn't
always
he? "Join
saw
me,
it
fulfill
anyway.
your destiny. Join me,
Yeah.
fulfill your destiny." So, I mean, he's obviously thinking that Luke's going to be like incredibly powerful, and I see your way of thinking there, and I'd never looked at it like that. I always thought it was the fact that he was disappointed because he had lost one of the only other people that could have helped Vader overthrow the Emperor, because he wanted to rule the galaxy as father and son. So,
I'm not
but
sure that fits with the fact that there's a little bit of good still in him, and that's what we're seeing in those
yeah, but
moments connecting with his
we
son.
didn't know that though, did we? I
No, but I
wasn't
think you
aware that
do.
at that time.
No, but I think you do. I think that's the
Yeah.
first inkling you see of it, because
Wow.
there's a kind of an intimacy or a tenderness in those.
Yeah.
I mean, it's James Earl Jones's. I mean, it's James Earl Jones, isn't it? It's the way he's been directed to
Oh,
say
he
those
delivered those
lines.
lines absolutely fantastically.
And
He was
because it could have,
brilliant.
I think it could have been a lot. It could have been a lot. It could have been a lot different if he'd not
Yeah.
said those words in that way. So that's how I think. I'm trying to go
No,
back to
fair play.
how I've
Yeah.
always thought about it. I've never really analysed it as much as we're just doing it now. But
Yeah, yeah.
think I think that's how I always saw it.
Yeah.
It's just that
Yeah.
his arm drops in disappointment when Luke drops down
Oh,
the
never. I'm
tube.
gonna have to watch it again. Any excuse to watch it again. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then uh Empire Strikes Back ends on what I could say was a dark note for the rebellion. You know, Han's been taken by the bounty hunter to Jabba the Hutt. You know, they're in a pretty, Luke's just had his butt kicked and found out that he's, well, been told that Vader's his father and stuff like that. Then we have the Return of the Jedi. I mean, again, what a film. What were your expectations for that?
I
Knowing
think
what you've known after The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, I think they were. I think they were high. It was the first film. It was the first of the films that I was waiting for, that I can remember
Yeah,
excitement in the playground
yeah,
talking about it. And there were
yeah,
people there were people talking about Jabba the Hutt before we'd ever
yeah.
seen him, and such like. And there was excitement, I think, about it, unlike there had been before. And I don't think we really knew what was going on. I think there was a lot. I remember a lot of speculation when Yoda says in The Empire Strikes Back, when Obi-Wan says that boy is our last hope, and Yoda says there is another.
Yeah.
And there was a lot. I remember a lot of speculation. Who is it? Who is that going to? Who is that other? Is it Han? Is it? I don't think people
Is it someone that we
necessarily.
haven't seen yet? Is there someone that I
Is it
mean, I
someone we
thinking
haven't
have we,
seen?
because
Yeah.
I didn't ever think that Leia rather was going to be Luke's sister.
No.
Didn't see that coming.
No.
So,
I remember
yeah, but
thinking.
I mean,
I remember hoping it was going to be Wedge. No.
oh wow,
Which
crikey,
is like, what
blimey,
crazy now, where we are now.
yeah,
But at the time, he'd
wow,
survived the Death Star attack.
yeah,
He'd taken out an
yeah.
AT-AT. It just, 10-year-old
All
old
fingers
kid
were pointing to
fantasies,
Wedge at
isn't
that
it?
time, were they? All
It was,
arrows pointing to Wedge. But I mean,
yeah.
as a movie overall, some consider it Return of the Jedi probably the weaker of the three. I I don't know. I think when I look at it and analyze it, I think they are all really, really on par with each other. Maybe Empire just tipping the scales and going above. But, you know, I mean, I keep harping back to it. That scene at the end where Luke does not want to confront Vader. He knows that he's his father. He
Brilliant.
doesn't want to fight him.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got the Emperor there manipulating absolutely everything. He's really pushing for this. And I just think that's absolutely fantastic storytelling.
Brilliant
But the
acting.
bit that gets me, and I still go on about it, is the lightsaber duel between Luke and Vader on the Death Star. When Vader says rather, if you will not turn to the dark side, then perhaps she will. What a line that is. I mean, I just because, I mean, as a story writer, you've got to be thinking, how is this kid going to turn? How are we going to get him to fight? And to come up with that, well, I just think was absolute genius. It really was.
Yeah. It's phenomenal. He's baiting him, and
Yeah.
Luke's hiding in the shadows, and that's the point at which he
Yeah.
pushes him to the edge. It's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
I
I
love
mean,
the film. I think the film's brilliant.
Jedi. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, yeah. It really, I'd love it. I absolutely love it.
Mm-hmm.
So when Jedi finishes then, and it ends on a real happy note, did you think that was it for Star Wars? Was you expecting anything else? I mean, I
I
know we
think
had the, the extended, expanded universe and stuff like that, and then we had the
mm,
Droids cartoon and the Ewoks and stuff like that. But did you think that ever we're going to go back and do 1, 2, and 3?
I think I think for a while there was a lot of hope around that would happen, and
Yeah.
I was still getting the Return of the Jedi comic and such, and there was talk in that, what will be next, and then it just kind of died, didn't it?
Yeah.
Without,
Yeah.
I mean, we were kids. I don't know whether there was any sort of explanation. I mean, you hear now that George was waiting till the technology caught up before he wanted to go back and do
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3. I
Yeah.
don't know whether
Yeah.
that's the case or whether we knew that was the case. Then I think I thought, wow, it's gone. I mean, there were a
Yeah.
couple of Ewoks films, like you say, the Droids cartoon and stuff.
Oh
And I,
God,
and
yeah.
I,
I
I,
forgot
I
about those
watched all
films
that
actually.
stuff, but
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
none of it was, up to standard really. It was
Yeah.
it was a bit of Star Wars to keep you going, and then it just kind of disappeared, didn't it?
Because after 1983 is not only did Star Wars, there wasn't any like Star Wars movies, but the action figures. There were no more action figures. That was
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
After 83, this, Star Wars had pretty much run its course, and because there were no Star Wars figures, the figures weren't selling, they were going for cheap. I mean,
yeah.
as a kid, did you carry the story on, or, with your figures and your toys, or
I
was that
did
it for
for a
you as well?
while. I did for a while. I always regret that I moved on to Transformers about 6 months too early because I missed picking up a lot of really, really cheap Star Wars figures and play sets
Yeah,
and
yeah,
vehicles. And if only I'd hung on and sort of insisted I wanted those instead of moving on to Transformers, I'd have probably had a much bigger collection now
yeah,
still of original stuff.
yeah,
So I kind of regret that. So to an extent, I did. I certainly never got, didn't really get rid of anything much. Eventually a few
mm,
things went.
yeah,
But yeah, and so for a few years I moved on to Transformers and Action Force. But
yeah,
then, sort of in my mid-teens, I got back into Star Wars. It came back because I guess the films were more available on video. I remember the first time we got
yeah,
Return of the Jedi on video. We rented it, and I recorded it on an audio cassette so that I could listen to the audio of it over and over again before we actually bought a video. So
yeah,
I was still massively into Star Wars, I think, but there was nothing around. But
yeah,
I did get back into the figures, got the figures out again, and I did a
mm,
few swaps with people who were getting rid of
yeah,
things. Picked up a few things then, sort of in my mid-teens, so
mm,
and started picking up a few other things. But it was a bit of a
yeah.
desert as far as
It
the
was.
rest
It
ran,
was. Well,
wasn't it?
a lot of people describe that as the dark times. I mean, you had your extended universe, you had your comics and stuff like that. You even had your games. Your
Yeah,
I think it was Shadows of the Empire. Now, I
yeah.
didn't
I got
really
I got
pay
into
sort of
the
like
I
too
got into
much
this
attention to that.
the role playing game.
Oh,
I
look at
never really
those!
played it very
Wow,
much, but
wow. I remember that. My God.
there's such
Yeah,
fantastic source books. There's so much to read, and there are
yeah.
a whole bunch of different source books. There's like a technical manual to the Death Star, and there's all sorts of other
Oh,
things.
I
There's
miss those
fold out
days.
maps and
Yeah,
like plans of things,
yeah.
and there were even little
Insane.
lead figures that you could paint. And I don't know what happened
Yeah,
to mine,
yeah.
but I
I
did,
remember those as well.
and
Oh
and that was
God.
absolutely awesome. And that for me was one of the ways I tried to
To
carry it
carry
on.
on. Yeah, yeah.
I joined the Lucasfilm fan club for a while, and but
Wow.
hoping for some news, hoping to get the hot off the press news that something would happen, but it
Yeah.
didn't. And then, sort of,
Well,
eventually, I
let's
moved
fast
off.
forward to 1993, stroke 1994. A certain film came out, Jurassic Park.
Hmm.
Apparently, it was after that film was made, Lucas said, "We've got the technology. We can make the films I want to make." So not long after Jurassic Park had been made, Lucas said, "Right, let's go back and do episodes 1, 2, and 3." So when that became common knowledge and people knew about it, how were your feelings then? What was your thoughts?
Immensely excited, really
Yeah,
excited. I can remember downloading the trailer
yeah,
um, to watch. I mean, a lot of people remember trying to download the Phantom Menace trailer and being immensely excited by it. And seeing it, it was on. There was some film you had to at the cinema. You could go and see it at the cinema, couldn't you?
yeah,
and you'd see that trailer. And I think they showed Star Wars. I think Star Wars was shown as well, and they put the trailer on our cinema anyway near here. I went and saw Star Wars, but the trailer for the Phantom Menace was on as well, and it was just amazing when you see the Gungans coming out of the swamp.
I mean, what a shot that was! Absolutely incredible, wasn't it? It's like, wow, yeah.
Everything about it said Star Wars as well. You know, it's a thrilling trailer, and everything about it is Star Wars. And so, yeah, very excited, very excited.
So when the movie actually came out and you went to see it, I mean, did you have high expectations? Were those expectations met, or did you feel kind of flat? They were.
I didn't come out of it flat. I remember I went with a friend and came out, and I enjoyed it. It's impossible not to. There's some real Star Wars magic moments in there. But there's things about it that aren't. But I remember saying it feels like a Star Wars film. And that, I think, to me was the most important. Did I love it like I loved the original trilogy? No.
Yeah.
I found Jar Jar a bit irritating. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't as it was a different kind of story. There was the political intrigue, the Trade Federation, and such like. I was a bit thrown by it, I suppose, to begin. The first time.
Yeah.
Saw it 2 or 3 times at the cinema, I think. But thought, I'm excited for what's going to come. I think I probably expected it to get further in the story. I think I may have been a little bit disappointed that, we were just dealing with Anakin as a little boy, thinking, God, where are we going with this? But I thought the performances were brilliant. I'd seen Ewan McGregor in stuff like Train Spotting and such, and it was such a departure. He seemed like a great pick for Obi-Wan, a young Obi-Wan, and so I was pleased. I was thrilled that Ian McDiarmid was back.
I mean, again, his performance was absolutely outstanding.
Yeah.
So then after Phantom Menace, then you had Attack of the Clones and the Revenge of the Sith. I mean, what were your overall thoughts of the prequel trilogy in general with all 3 of the films? I mean, because I know that those films divided a lot of opinion as well. And I think George Lucas was like, well, that's it. I'm done making films now.
Yeah, I was a bit disappointed by Attack of the Clones because it was like watching a cartoon.
Yeah,
there was, and some of the stuff I was reading and such, like, everyone was just, it was like an individual and green screen, and I felt you could see that, and I felt it took something away from it. I was really irritated by Ewan McGregor's beard. It was his real beard, then it wasn't. It was his real beard, then it wasn't. And I just thought, that's really crap production values. I realised he'd gone off and he was filming something else without a beard, and they needed him back for reshoots. So they stuck this dreadful beard on him. But it really irritated me at the time. And I just thought, that's really poor. I loved the clones. But
you see, it's funny you say that about the clones. I didn't dislike them, but when you compare them to the Stormtrooper and you actually physically can see that there's someone in a costume and they all, I mean, but like I've said before, the clones are all CGI. It kind of didn't look right. And like you say, it was very much like an animated movie, wasn't it, in certain aspects and stuff like that. But
I mean, as you know, I'm a big fan of Christopher Lee, and I was really excited he was going to be in the film, and I was disappointed. He felt underused, and at times he looked like he was like looking around for someone to act to, and and there was him, Tamora Morris, and someone with a rubber head, and everything else was green screened. And I just thought, even a great actor like that struggling in.
Look, he's not the only one, because Sir Ian McKellen, he struggled in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. He really did, because don't forget, we seem to forget that the way movies were made had changed drastically, a hell of a lot. People weren't used to this green screen. They weren't used to the CGI. And I think people are more used to it now because it's more commonplace. But back then in the early days, I think people really did kind of struggle with that to a certain degree.
It seemed overused because it seemed to be slightly toned down by the time we got to Revenge of the Sith, which is a much, much better film anyway, and it's a much tighter story, really. And you know where it's going, and it's absolutely thrilling. And And I say I like the clones in Attack of the Clones. I loved the Phase 2 clones with a different
Yeah.
coloured armor. That I've kind of gone off. I've kind of gone off Star Wars a little bit after Attack of the Clones. Thought, this is as good as it's getting. I'm a little bit disappointed. When Revenge of the Sith came out, I was back up and I was collecting figures again. You know, the different clone units and such like.
Yeah.
I really got back into it. And that film, I mean, recently went. When it was on at the cinema again, I went with a friend who hadn't seen it in about 10, 15 years. And I took the boys and we all absolutely loved it at the cinema. It was phenomenal. It was a film made for cinema. It was just incredible. It really
It's
sort of shot up
interesting
in my...
You make an interesting point. Sorry, you said it's a film made for cinema. We've got a lot of Star Wars on the TV and stuff like that. Do you feel that Star Wars should remain on the big screen? It's a film and a story that should be told on the big screen, not the TV series.
I suppose with the knowledge of the TV shows that we've got, I've got to say no, because there's some brilliant TV Star Wars.
Yeah.
The Mandalorian seasons 1 and 2 were phenomenal. And, you know, as everyone in this community knows, I absolutely adore it. Andor is the best thing that I think Star Wars Disney have done. So you can make great Star Wars television, but not all of it's been successful. But I guess not all of the films have been successful as well. I think it can operate in both mediums, but it's about I guess it's about understanding what's right for the film, what's right to be released at the cinema, and what's right to be developed as television. And I think they're certainly struggling at the moment with what's right for cinema because they can't get a film out. They can't get a film into production, really. Well, apart from Mandalorian.
I mean, look, Rogue One, I thought was a great film.
Amazing film.
It was a great film. I really enjoyed that. Again, it was one of those films where I watched it first time around, and I was like, yeah. And then I watched it again, and the more I watched it, the better it seemed to get. Solo really did not stand a chance as a standalone film. I don't think it stood a chance because of what happened with The Last Jedi.
I was going to say,
I mean, that was, well, we all know.
Yeah.
But, you know, Ron pointed out last week that Star Wars is a formula, and it's a formula made up of different ingredients, so to speak. You know, you've got your mythology, you've got your different stories, and, you know, like a fairy tale and all that sort of stuff. And you put all those ingredients together and it comes out with Star Wars. And he said, and the films that aren't as great, the reason for that being, in his opinion, is because some of those ingredients are missing. Would you agree with that?
I think so, absolutely. Yeah. It's like, what is it they say? You've got to break eggs to make a cake or something like that. It's,
yeah.
If there's something missing from it, yeah, definitely. And I think that's, you know, without wanting to be negative, in my opinion, that's why The Acolyte failed, because they were trying to throw some pretty random ingredients into that mix. For whatever reasons, maybe with the best of intentions, but, you know, to my mind, you can't make Star Wars that in that way. It is what it is. You need to make that story somewhere else if it doesn't fit a certain framework of Star Wars. It may fit TV or it may fit film, but
I mean, if you go back to the original trilogy, I mean, Star Wars sort of like made its own rules, you know, and it defied expectation time and time again. And I think where George Lucas left Star Wars, it was in a fairly decent place. And I think, like you say, not all of Disney Star Wars has been bad. There has been a lot of good elements, but I think on the whole, I think they've really, really struggled to consistently make decent Star Wars. And I you know, is that down to Lucasfilm? Is that down to them not getting the right people in to do the stories and getting people into who care about Star Wars?
It ultimately sits with Lucasfilm and Disney, the people that make those big decisions. They must be watching pitches. It sounds like they've just the guy who was writing the supposedly the next Rey film. He apparently wrote 3 scripts of it, and they've now got rid of him, and someone else is coming in to write it. Everything seems to be, you know, whoever it is that's looking at these pitches, you know, they need to know exactly what they want, and they don't seem to know what they want, and they don't seem to know what Star Wars is, and they don't seem to know what the Star Wars audience want. And now I know the Star Wars audience is very different. You know, there's 50-year-old guys like us. There are people older than us who were in their teens watching it the first time. But then there's kids watching it too, and it's got to appeal to everyone. We've got to be careful not to be overly dogmatic. Say Star Wars has always got to be like this, I guess. So I can't blame them for wanting to try something.
No,
new. But there's got to be
I do get that. Yeah,
it's got to be the same, because otherwise you're not making Star Wars. Star Trek has this same problem, I think, as well. That if you miss the point of Star Trek, if you miss the essence of what Gene Roddenberry, his message, then you're gonna ball Star Trek up as well. I think there's been examples of that.
Well, they already have.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, listen, Star Wars, it's a story of good versus evil. You've got all these elements like we're talking about that are interwoven within it that made Star Wars the movies that they were. And I don't know. You say it's down to Lucasfilm, but Kathleen Kennedy was there when the original trilogy was made. She's got no excuses. She should know what the Star Wars fans want. She should know firsthand what Star Wars is, because she's been there from the start. Dave Filoni worked under George Lucas in the Clone Wars. And I think some of his stuff is absolutely incredible, especially with the Clone Wars. Some of the storytelling and the story arcs that and the character development in those series I thought were absolutely fantastic. And and he was involved in The Mandalorian. But then again, you've got Jon Favreau, who I thought did a great job. He cares about Star Wars. He gets what Star Wars is about.
Yes.
So to say,
but Jon Favreau wrote the book of Boba Fett, and so to me, I've got that slight doubt, because I feel that story, personally, my opinion, that story was flawed. I didn't enjoy
it was. But do you think that's because Kathleen Kennedy put her little fingers in it and said, right, you need to change this, you need to do this?
I mean, is this happening in other franchises? Is this happening where other film franchises or other television franchises are being made? They talk about things being made by committee, and there's so many different voices, there's so many different people asking you to.
Well, you got to look at Marvel. You just got to look at Marvel, haven't you? I mean, they've had their issues, and again, they're owned by Disney. But yeah, it's
hard to know. But they seem to have lost their way, because they're not getting these films out. They keep announcing films, and then they get canned, and directors move on, and writers move on. And it's happened in the midst. I mean, even Rogue One, Gareth Edwards didn't finish the film. Someone else finished the film. Rogue One's brilliant as far as I'm concerned, but it took Tony
Solo.
Gilroy
Look at
coming
Solo.
on board,
That was the two guys, wasn't it? They got let go, and then Ron Howard come in.
Ron Howard came in and finished it off. So he had to kind of make something that, I mean, we'll never know what the version was going to be like previously. But Lucasfilm, I mean, are they interfering? Are they? They want to get in these creatives, but then they're not letting them run with it. Is it because they're straying too far outside of Star Wars, or what people see as Star Wars, or do they have a misguided view of what Star Wars is? Because Solo's. I quite like Solo now. I didn't enjoy it when I went and saw it at the cinema, but it was 6 months after The Last Jedi, and it was kind of when I came out, and I watched it a couple of times on DVD, and gradually I've learned to like it quite a lot.
So I've got some more questions for you.
Okay.
So what is it about Star Wars that really stood out for you? And it could be anything. It could be the music, it could be the special effects, the characters, the lightsabers, anything. What was it that stood out for you the most?
I think it's the whole design of the world. I think it sounds ridiculous. It's like such a believable world. It's not because it's realistic science around the ships. But there's something so believable about it. Everything's grimy and dirty, and
lived in look.
There's something. It feels, and this is why I like the Lord of the Rings films. I like Tolkien, because there's like there's a huge sense of history to it, and so you feel there's so much behind everything. Everything's evolved to that point. It's not just been created and plonked there for you. You feel you're immersed in a world that's very real, and it's got it's got a long past and it's got a future ahead as well. It just feels
Yeah.
And I think it was that. I think you could immerse yourself in it.
Yeah. I mean, you said
the
was
music's
believable.
phenomenal too. I mean, the music's another thing.
John Williams was just incredible. I mean, I couldn't imagine Star Wars without him, to be honest with you.
No,
I mean, what he did with that score was just absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Empire Strikes Back, best soundtrack, by the way.
Yeah.
But
completely.
I've said before, you saying it come across as believable. The locations that they filmed on in the original trilogy were locations, on Earth, but they didn't feel like Earth. Tatooine was Tunisia, and it didn't feel like it was in Tunisia. It felt like it was on a desert planet.
Yes.
And then you get to the prequel trilogy, which was, I guess, Tatooine again. You could believe that it was believable. I mean, even Dagobah, for crying out loud, it was a swamp set up in a studio, a massive set, 4 or 5 feet off the ground. And you would think it was some kind of mystic planet. It was just incredible how they did that. It really was.
Yeah.
But then, the prequels, it was all pretty much CGI, so it didn't feel. It looked stunning, but it didn't feel believable in certain elements for me. But then you go back to the sequels, and they went back to the old way of doing things. That's the one good thing I will say about the sequel movies. They went back to having guys in costumes and stormtrooper outfits, and they filmed on sets, and they filmed on location in a lot of places, which I just thought brilliant, because it gives it that lived in look. I mean, that scene when Rey's going along on her speeder and you've got that crashed Star Destroyer, I just thought, what a scene that is.
Incredible. Yeah.
The cinematography in those films, I thought, were probably some of the best that I've seen it across the Star Wars franchise. So there are good things about it, but for me, the story lacked. But yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying about the sequels. That's the only. I mean, I remember really being particularly excited by the stormtroopers, that they were real, they were tangible, because it was the downside to the clones, I suppose. But yeah, the sequels, I enjoyed The Force Awakens. I was excited for it. It felt like a Star Wars film. But then after that, no, really.
Yes.
The Last Jedi was a painful and confusing experience at the cinema the first time. And I think the audience were kind of stunned. And sadly, Carrie Fisher had died. And
she died after the making of the Last Jedi, She passed away,
And then, obviously, Han's dead. They kill Luke off. And I came out of cinema and said to the same friend that I'd gone to see The Phantom Menace with, and said, what the hell are they going to do now? And because I just thought they've got none of them were left, and I had absolutely no connection to the other characters. I'd enjoyed the chemistry between Rey and Finn and Poe in the first film, but in The Last Jedi, it was sort of non-existent. I mean,
do you know what I would have done? Do you know what I would have done? I mean, no one could have foreseen Carrie Fisher's death. No one could have seen that coming. But what they should have done and it's just popped in my noggin. When the bridge that Princess Leia's on explodes and they will get sucked into space, that should have been the death of Princess Leia. But no. They had to do this stupid Mary Poppins thing and bring her back. That would have been a far better storyline if she had died there and then, because it would have given something for Luke to have got more involved in and come out of his hermit-like. Do you know what I mean? Because he could have tapped into the Force and sensed it. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And that scene where they blow them into space really annoyed me. It's just the ignominious death of Admiral Akbar. He's blown into space.
Yes.
Like,
he deserved better than that.
And there's no mention.
No.
I know it's a
he
plot
deserved
device
better,
so that the purple-haired vice admiral can have a falling out with Poe and such like. It's all done for that purpose. But it's Admiral Akbar, for God's sake.
He should have been the one in the seat of that Mon Calamari cruiser, shouldn't he? He should have been the one in the seat of that Mon Calamari cruiser, ramming it into that big Star Destroyer. Exactly. That should have been him doing that, not purple-haired lady, purple rinse. Ridiculous. Moving on. Sorry, what was you going to say?
Just terrible film, in my opinion. In my opinion.
Anyway, how important is Star Wars to you within the Star Wars universe?
Star Wars is huge for me. It's always
No,
there.
the story. How important is the story?
Story. Sorry, mate. Yeah.
Yeah.
The story. The story's everything. The story's everything. The best Star Wars that they've done has got a story that is engaging, and well written, well mapped out. You know, it's got to be. It's all about the story, really, first and foremost.
Yeah.
Everything else is there to dress the story, to back the story, to illustrate the story, really, isn't it? It's So if you haven't got the story, nothing else. It doesn't matter how good your special effects are, or how great your sets and costumes are, or even how good your actors are. It's soulless then without story.
I mean, I've got to say, a lot of credit does go to the actors who were in the original trilogy and the prequels, because as much as a great storyteller George Lucas is, he isn't the best director, so he didn't really give them too much direction. And you had a relatively kind of new-ish kind of cast for Star Wars with Harrison Ford, because he hadn't done anything. He'd been in a couple of films, but he had nothing major. Mark Hamill was in some TV series. Carrie Fisher, Eddie Reynolds and I can't remember her name.
Debbie Fisher.
Not Debbie Reynolds and Eddie Fisher, the daughter of so that's it. And so they weren't really household names, but when they did the line, when they played those parts, they were believable. They made those parts believable, because although the dialogue was pretty cheesy back then, and it was like, what is this? They did their jobs, and they did it so well that they made it believable. And I guess the same kind of could have been said by the prequel trilogy. Again, the way films were made had changed. Attitudes had changed to, in that time period. They kind of struggled a bit because, like I say, George Lucas wasn't the greatest director, but I mean, they did kind of make it believable. I mean, there's some real dodgy lines in.
Yeah, they've got kind of stiffer, more formal relationships, a lot of them in the prequels, it seems. Watching Star Wars today, they're such young, and there's a kind of there's a natural warmth between those characters and their performance, and that's also there between Alec Guinness and Mark Hamill, especially. There's some lovely warm moments, and it's just, I mean, that's just expressions on Alec Guinness's face, brilliant actor. And I find that in the prequels, it's there are a lot more much more formal exchanges, and when
do you think that was because of the time period it was set in? Do you think that was because of the time period it was set in?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's the time period it's set in, and they're kind of a lot of the scenes take place and people are in sort of like, I don't know, more formal settings as well, I suppose. They're in the Jedi Temple, or they're in the Senate, or something like that. There's not a lot of time for. There's not a lot of warm moments, like when everyone's sat in the Falcon and Luke's practicing and they're playing chess with Chewie and Han's, having an opinion about blasters and lightsabers. That's you don't really get a scene like that in the prequels, do you? I think, and when they put Anakin and Padme together, there's a kind of an awkwardness. There's a kind of and I think that's partly the script, and it's possibly partly Hayden being a little bit of an immature actor. Perhaps that there's a real sort of awkwardness. There isn't the chemistry that you'd have wanted between these two.
I put this to Rum last week because he mentioned this, and I said to him, I don't know if it was Rum or I've mentioned it before, but do you think that was because it was an awkward situation for them two to be in, because he was a Jedi and she was a senator, and they shouldn't have really been, because they started having feelings? Do you think because they knew there was feelings, that it kind of made it a little bit awkward, or do you think that's just me making that up?
I think that might be wishful thinking. I think it's just slightly stiff acting, unfortunately.
No,
to be honest, that's how I've always seen
it. No, that's fair enough. I mean,
I've learned to love the prequels, though. I have, I have come to love them, and perhaps that's now because you compare them to the sequels. But
I'll ask you the question at the end. We'll move on. How important do you think the older generation of Star Wars fans are to the Star Wars franchise? The more mature, like ourselves.
Well, we're important to Star Wars, like everyone else every other generation who loves Star Wars. I mean, we were there at the beginning. You know, there are maybe people who are 60 who were there going to the cinema and remember it from, you know, when the first film came out as well. But you know, we've been there all through. We remember. We're the OT generation. We're the kids of the OT generation. So you know, that feels special to us. I think I said this to you before. This is like it's like the kids that were there for Beatlemania, isn't it? You know, everyone else wishes they'd been there for it. And so I think we're important. We're one part of it. It's if you're thinking of it from Lucasfilm's perspective, they need to look to all the generations. They need to look to the 6 to 10-year-olds that we were when Star Wars: The Jedi came out. And they need to look at the teens. They need to look at the young adults, and they still need to think about us as well. They still need to think of us.
I was just about to say that.
We spend a lot of money on Star Wars, and we spend a lot of time on Star Wars, and we pay for subscriptions, and we buy Blu-ray box sets and all sorts, don't we? So, you know,
I mean,
we've got
the thing is, the thing is, it's like, yes, we understand that you need to get a new generation of fans in. I totally get that, and there's not an issue with that at all. But don't do it at the expense of the older generation. I keep saying it. You know, it's, you know, you don't need to do it. How important are strong female characters within Star Wars?
Yeah, they've always been there, and they always should be. Yeah. I mean, you get a stronger female character than Princess Leia.
No, but Lucasfilm seemed to forget that when Kathleen Kennedy's turned around saying we don't like strong female leads.
Yeah.
What? Little things like that.
We don't like badly acted, badly written female leads. That's the difference, isn't it?
Look, I've got nothing against Daisy Ridley. I think she's brilliant. And as a character, Rey could have been brilliant, but she was badly written. You know, there was no character development because she just knew everything. You know, there was no thought process gone into it. There was no in-depth training with her. It was just she knew it all, sort of thing. You know, and you just I mean, where was her training when she did the Jedi mind trick? When she did the Jedi mind trick in Phantom Menace, Force Awakens, I thought, how does she know how to do that? She's not been trained.
Yeah, and I mean, people have talked about it on this show in previous episodes about the Star Wars being the hero's journey. And she kind of she kind of circumvented the hero's journey. She was sort of quite a long way along it already, it seems.
Yeah.
She didn't take the journey. We didn't join her for the journey. I mean, she did. Her character moved on from, you know, scrapyard, you know, vagrant to Jedi Master, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, look, listen, I don't buy the notion, oh, she's a Palpatine, so she was very, very strong with the Force. No, don't. It's just a cop-out. It's just a cop-out. Yeah, I mean, look, I think up until The Acolyte, Star Wars has had loads of strong female characters.
Oh my God.
And leads as well. I mean, crikey, you know, this day and age, you know, it's not about the male lead, it's not about the female lead, it's about, you know, equality. You know, they're all important, aren't they? But you know, Padme Amidala, Bo-Katan, Ahsoka Tano, for crying out loud. I mean, she was an animated character that no one liked to start with.
Absolutely.
But then you know, people grew into her and stuff like that, and you know, she's a great character, and I think she's been brilliant in the in live action.
I mean, look at Mon Mothma, who comes out like, you know, she turns up in Return of the Jedi like the Queen of England, doesn't she? She's, you know, she walks on and she's leading the Rebel Alliance against the Empire, and she's there. She's like the angelic opposite to the Emperor in a way. And you know, she's brilliant. She doesn't have a lot to do, but she is the figurehead of the rebellion. Yeah, she's a pivotal character. So, you know, in that sense, females are strong in all aspects of Star Wars.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's things that are. I mean, I understand that they filmed some female X-wing pilots or fighter pilots in Return of the Jedi, and for some reason they don't appear in the cut. Now, I don't know what the reasoning is for that. And as we come on, we see Rogue One. We've got female pilots.
But you had female pilots in Phantom Menace.
Yeah. So I don't know what the reason is that they were perhaps cut out of Return of the Jedi, but
Yeah.
actually, I suppose it was inclusive that they were there, and they were perhaps it was just a scene that was cut for, you know, for editorial reasons rather than it being, you know, anything other than that. But there's no, I've never felt there's any sense of discrimination against women. Women have really strong roles, and especially in Star Wars that's come back, you know, through Andor, Rogue One, The Mandalorian. You know, that there's really strong female characters throughout.
Well, they had a great strong female character in Cara Dune, but they didn't seem to like her very much, did they? So they got rid of her. But there you are. How important is it for Star Wars to be inclusive?
I think it is important that it's inclusive. I would say that Star Wars has been inclusive. It's how you do that. I think you were talking with Brett about this. I mean, it's I think Star Wars has always, I suppose, reflected the society or the time that it's in, you know, and I suppose that needs to carry on, but not at the expense of the story or you know, as long as it's not subverting the story, really. I mean, I was thinking about this, and you know, I mean, what we're getting as is that we, you know, is that, you know, there are people out there saying that, you know, in the Acolyte they're trying to push certain agendas on us, and they were coming out before it came out, and the creator or of it, Leslie Headland, was saying certain things. I don't know the specifics, but we're kind of trying to push particular agendas. I guess kind of losing my train of thought, but it's.
I know what you're trying to say. Yeah. You don't need to lead with that. The story should it should be enough to entice you in. I you know, Rum said it the other week. If he meets someone and they, you know, and if they're gay or lesbian and that, it's not the first thing they say to you. Hi, I'm Stuart. By the way, I'm gay. No, I'm not. Just you know, just in that as an example. But do you know what I mean? No one cares. You don't lead with that because I don't.
Got no problem if we're going to have characters who are gay or straight or non-binary or of you know, obviously of different.
But it's got to fit within the story. It's got to fit within the story. Don't just shoehorn it in at the expense of the story.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Andor, there's a lesbian relationship in Andor.
Yeah.
It's not only dealt with. It's really nicely written. It's really well written. It's really well presented. It's not pushed in anyone's face. But what it's doing, and I think sometimes this is the purpose of when there's this push, when people say there's boxes to tick, you've got to have somebody who fits one of these types in. It's doing it in a way that's not clumsy or obvious. It's just, here are two people who are having a relationship whilst also being part of the fledgling Rebel Alliance, and you're actually dealing with the difficulties of two people in a relationship, because one's a bit more driven than the other and has got less time. So Cinta's got less time, hasn't she? Because she's more obsessed. She's at the window, and Vel comes in, and she doesn't even turn around and say hi to her. And so you're looking at, it's a real relationship moment between two people, and that's what's important. Not that they happen to be, in this instance, they happen to be women. And they're also it's also interracial, I suppose, as well. So that's and again, that's not pushed.
But the thing is, because of the way it's written, the way it's written and the way it's dealt with, it didn't seem like it was just forced upon us. It fitted in perfectly. And look, listen, I think when it comes to TV series and movies and stuff like that, we know that the writers, they write in a little bit of themselves, or events that have happened to them and stuff like that, and or real world events or issues and stuff. I get that. I totally get that. It's in every single form of TV media, movies, TV series, but it's how you go about doing it. And for me, I think George Lucas, Star Wars is a universe set a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So nothing should resemble Earth, or do you know what I mean? Or any of the real life issues that we face on Earth. Yes, have those issues in there. But what George did was he blended it in so perfectly within his universe that you didn't really notice. It seemed familiar. Do you know what I mean? It was like, okay, well, this is sort of like happened back on Earth, and you buy into that story because the way it's written and the way it's come across. Whereas if someone is just putting an agenda there for the sake of it being there to tick boxes, that's when it doesn't work. And I don't think the story was good enough or strong enough in The Acolyte for it to work. Just my opinion.
And I think if you go into, and it's also about external of what we're seeing, the external marketing, they were coming into it heavy-handedly, making these various proclamations about it. Well, that never happened with Andor. We just completely accepted Vel and Cinta's relationship. I'm sure there's some people out there who don't, and of course that's the problem. That's part of the problem in the world, isn't it? There are people who have no tolerance and no acceptance.
Yeah, but I mean, listen. I mean, I just think that if people haven't got any tolerance for that, then again, that's on them, and some people might call them ignorant. I'm not going to comment either way. I'm fairly tolerant to it because I know people who are gay and lesbian in the same-sex relationships. It does not bother me in the slightest.
Yeah.
And I get people, inclusive, to being inclusive and equality. I get all that. It doesn't bother me, honestly. But it just, please don't force it upon us. And because someone doesn't like something because it's got a gay actor in it or a lesbian actor in it, they were poor actors. They weren't great actors at the end of the day. And, just because you are gay or lesbian, it doesn't stop you from being, what's the word? Criticized in a fair and just kind of way,
Absolutely, yes. It's not, if you're being criticized or people are expressing hate speech towards you because of your identity, that's one thing. But if people are saying, that was a really terrible performance. Now, you've got a bad script and you weren't being very well directed and the story makes no sense, but still,
well, look, that's probably not helped
job
them.
Of it. And that's
probably not helped them, is it?
With The Acolyte, isn't it? And those people must be so perhaps being so oversensitive that they automatically think any criticism is at their is at the expense of their gender identity or color or whatever it happens to be.
But the thing is, I would be kind of like, well, take a step back, and then I'd be like going to the writers and the director, what's going on here then? What is this? But they don't. They all sort of like huddle together in their, anyway. But it's a shame. I've got one more question to ask you, but what I wanted to ask you first before we finish, Star Wars had a massive impact on us as kids for our generation. Do you feel Star Wars of today is having that same impact on today's generation?
No, sadly not. I mean, I've got two grandsons. They're 9 and 10, and they like Star Wars. They know that they're going to watch Star Wars and with me, and they're going to get taken to the cinema to see it, and such like. And they get bought Star Wars figures for Christmas and birthdays as they always know they're going to get one, but they don't love it in the way I do, and I don't think that's going to happen. They're going to know of it. They're probably going to enjoy it. I hope they'll come to like it more, but there's so many other things that are diverting their attention. I sadly don't think it's going to matter to them. Now they're just one example, but that's with me gently nudging them in the right direction. It's not going to turn them. They're not going to be sat here in 40 years' time having a chat about Star Wars. I don't think anyway. I don't think that's going to happen.
I think it's such a shame, and I have again said this loads and loads of times. If Star Wars fails, no one wins. No one wins. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely.
People will lose faith in it. That you won't buy the action figures, the toys, and stuff like that. Not that kids are. It's predominantly our generation that are doing that.
Yeah, that's right.
But, we just want a good story, and we just want Star Wars great again. I mean, I know we're kind of talking about what made Star Wars great, but I don't know. It's a tough one because, like I say, I don't want Star Wars to fail because at the end we all lose out. We all lose out.
I really hope that Skeleton Crew brings on board a younger audience. I hope it's a success. I hope I enjoy it.
Listen,
I hope it's family-friendly entertainment
yeah,
in a Star Wars world. I really wish it the best. I hope that it's going to be great, and it's coming out the perfect time. We're going to get to watch it over the Christmas season. It's got the best chance, but I just hope that
I'm hoping it does as well. I mean, we know it is. We know it's pointed at kids. We know it's aimed at kids.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna, watch it. I'm gonna keep an open mind with it, and I'm gonna watch it and try and watch it through the eyes of a kid, and think to myself, would I have enjoyed this if I was a kid? And you know the answer is going to be absolutely, I will.
Yeah, because we're big kids still, aren't we? We're all big kids. We're still collecting toys, and we're living in the 80s. We're living in the past part of the time to get us through the week.
Definitely.
If we can switch off everything around us and allow ourselves to get immersed. I want to give it the best shot I can. If I don't like it, I'll say so. But I really hope that it will.
Well, so do I. And I again, from what I'm hearing, I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be just out just to rinse it, and it's a shame. If you are one of those people, please just watch it through the eyes of a kid. Pretend you're a kid again, 8 or 9 years old, and think, would I have enjoyed that? And you're guaranteed, because look, I've seen the trailer. There's some of it I'm like, maybe it's a little bit too suburban for my liking in certain aspects.
That one scene, doesn't it, of their home planet looks a little bit like suburban Los Angeles or something.
It does. And for me, that scene belongs in something like Star Trek, because Star Trek is set in, on Earth, isn't it? It's like it's like what our future could be. This is what future Earth looks like. We're set in a galaxy a long time ago, far away. Keep it that way. We don't want to see people out there mowing the lawns.
It's a bit too far, isn't it? It's a bit too close.
Then you got the school bus and they're sitting in class, but
the rest of it looks like quite a sort of a, it looks potentially fun. I'm going to be open-minded about it.
And I think we all should be. We all should be.
Yeah, there are people out there who all they're going to do is hit on everything, not just Star Wars. There are people out there doing YouTube, writing awful things just to get hits. You get a lot more hits if you're negative, don't you, than if you're positive. That's what they say. If you were doing a series saying what's crap about Star Wars, it would probably be getting a lot more people.
Don't put ideas in my head. Do not put ideas in my head.
Encourage that.
I mean, that'd be easy. What's crap about Star Wars? Acolyte, simple. Right. We come to the end of the hour, or the top of the hour. We're past the hour, but I've got one last question for you, Scott.
Okay.
Overall, what makes Star Wars great?
Wow. What makes Star Wars great? Gosh. Well, I think I was listening to a podcast called Rebel Force Radio, and they got a guy on called David West Reynolds, and he's the Star Wars archaeologist. He worked on the prequel films because George Lucas found out about him. He went out and found the sets where they'd filmed the original trilogy, and he ended up working on the prequels, adding layers of detail and layers of context, and he came up with the idea that lightsabers are powered by a crystal and various other things. He worked on all these visual dictionaries, these DK visual dictionaries, and he was talking on Rebel Force Radio about the hero's journey, but he was also talking about that Star Wars is mythic, and I think that's what makes it great. It's the fact that it's this layered mythology, and something, and that's something that's part of human nature. It stretches back to something like Homer's Odyssey and literature from 2000 BC onwards. It's something that's integral to us. I think we look for myth. We look for that myth. I think it came from, Stone Age people sitting around fires trying to understand the world and making up stories about constellations and, putting up standing stones and such. I think that's where it comes from. And George Lucas tapped into that in a way that's particularly special and unique. I think other people did it. Tolkien did it. Fantastic, rich, layered world with a great history. But there's lots of other examples, the Narnia stories and others. But Star Wars at that time, and for our generation and others, I think that myth, you know, is a hit. You know, I think that's what it is. I think that's what's made it great. There's something about it which is integral to us all, so it strikes that chord. That's
definitely,
what I think.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And on that note, I've got to say, Scott, I have thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you. Your passion and enthusiasm for Star Wars is just it's infectious. It really is. And you know, although we've talked about the negative side of things as well, it's refreshing to hear your thoughts. I've had a smile on my face. It's just been great talking to you. Thank you so much, and I hope you've enjoyed the conversation.
It's been fantastic. I've loved knowing that I was going to come on and do this, because it's really made me think about Star Wars, and watching Star Wars today was almost like it was a new experience, watching it, thinking about having this chat later. I kind of rediscovered that film, which sounds ridiculous. Another film I've seen well over 100 times at least.
No,
you know,
it's been awesome. Thank you so much for being part of the Sorry, what was you going to say?
I just saw new things in it, you know, with this sort of question in mind, what made Star Wars great. So it's been brilliant. Thanks for asking me on.
No, really do appreciate you coming on. For those of you who have stayed to the end, whether you're watching, whether you're listening, thank you so much. Do really appreciate your support. And if you are new to the channel, and just they're opinions. They're just opinions. Don't get too butthurt if we've said something that you don't agree with. But I just want to say a massive thank you. Take care, stay safe, and we shall see you in the next episode. Bye for now.
Bye.